Welcome to this live stream because it's an important one after day 3 of the first closed door, what's the only closed door, but the closed door test of the new Formula One cars at Barcelona. And we've got a guest who will be very informative in terms of what we are trying to see, what pictures have come out of the test, what information there is, and see where we're going, I think, with Formula One in 2026. I speak, of course, of my friend and colleague for many years now, Craig Scarborough. Craig, thanks for joining us, buddy. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Peter. Fantastic to be here. Turned out to be a really exciting start to the season. Even though it's a closed door test, we've had some images, and every image tells a little bit more about the cars, and it's shaping up to be a fascinating pre-season this year.
Yeah, it is that, and so many questions to be asked on the technical side and in terms of how everybody's going and what we can expect in 2026. I'm going to get through all of that today. And don't forget, you can join us on YouTube chat with your questions and comments. And that's for the next couple of hours, in which we'll be live. I won't be keeping Craig that long for sure, because I know he's got lots of other stuff to do. So enjoy Craig for the next foreseeable 40 minutes or so. And I'll be certainly picking his brains, and you can ask questions as well as to what's going on. So Scarbs, first of all, we did a brilliant analysis, or you did a brilliant analysis of the new Mercedes. Thank you so much for that and your insight on that. But just as we posted that, I think, correct if I'm wrong, I think you said it looks like Ferrari got the same hole in the diffuser. Is that right? Are we still thinking along those lines?
Yes, the slotted diffuser, or the hole in the diffuser, as a lot of people are calling it, has been adopted by a number of teams. Red Bull as well. We've got not so much a hole, but a whole chunk of the side of the diffuser missing. Ferrari, as I said, have done very similar to Mercedes, and I'm sure lots of other teams have got it in the pipeline at some stage as well. I've gone back and had a look at the regulations and checked with some people that understand how the regulations now work in terms of the CAD surfaces that have to be applied, and yeah, it's entirely legal. There's some performance in it. It's not, I don't think it's one of the things that you must have in the sport, but certainly opening up the side of the diffuser just inside the rear wheels is a way of putting some high energy air back into the diffuser to keep all of that airflow moving through it. Helps the expansion, gives you more downforce. We've seen teams such as Ferrari and Mercedes that have got these obviously undercut side pods that redirect air through to this slot, but we've seen a number of other teams that have got maybe more conventional side pods that seem to still be using this solution. So I think it's just going to be one of those things that teams will either adopt or maybe even discard as the season goes through, because the development rate at this stage of the season is going to be massive. And again, everything we talk about today, there's that usual caveat is that these are testing cars. They will change before Melbourne. They'll change during the Bahrain test that we've got coming up in a couple of weeks. So all we can really do is just analyze what's put in front of us. And, you know, when things change, then we'll have to have chats about that as well.
Scarbs, what's your feeling in general about the Ferrari? Can Ferrari fans feel optimistic? Is it too early to say? I mean, how do you see the car overall, SF26?
It's so hard with Ferrari, isn't it? I mean, I think we've jumped on a Ferrari bandwagon many times pre-season. Looking at the car, I would say that they've been surprisingly aggressive for what they've been describing as a Spec A car that's going to change a lot in the run up to the first few races. So, but Ferrari have got this diffuser slot. They've changed their front suspension to copy very much what McLaren were running last year with the multi-link lower arms, which will have a huge benefit in grip and tyre performance. Mercedes, we think, and probably Red Bull, probably most of the top teams have got this multi-link lower wishbone set up now. McLaren, it went almost unspoken about last year. With Ferrari, I think you can look at the car and go, well, the car's looking great. You can say that the power unit seems to be performing on track. Nothing but positive noises coming out of that. So, what have we got to temper that with? Because I think we've got to be balanced. Ferrari or Ferrari, this year it's about the power unit. It's about aerodynamics. It's also a lot about tyre management and the drivers getting that critical feel with these tyres. And if we just cast our mind back to last year, At the start of the year, Lando Norris wasn't getting on with McLaren. Oscar Piastri was. They made some changes to the front suspension, which again went kind of spoken about, but never really analysed in most of the mainstream media. And then next minute, Lando's got a handle on the car and Oscar didn't. Now, I believe that's actually to do with this steering angle that's set up by this multi-link lower suspension arm, or wishbone, if you'd like to call it that, just for simplicity. The danger Ferrari have got is that they fall into the same trap as McLaren did last year, and that the suspension system works in theory, but if it doesn't gel with one or both of the drivers, then you're going to have problems. And we know that both drivers struggled with the feel of that car last year. So, yeah, I think Ferrari are looking good. There's nothing there that's a red flag that joking aside, that suggests to me that they'll have anything other than a good year. Whether it's a championship year or a dominant year, it's hard to say. But certainly all the omens at the moment are looking relatively good. But, we just need to keep an eye on it particularly as we get into the last stage of the Bahrain test. And I think for all of the teams, that's the litmus test. But again, even having said that, it's a long, long season this year. Teams that are struggling at the early part of the year have got plenty of time to develop. Ferrari have got quite a bit of aero development time in hand over their rivals who have finished above them in the Constructors' Championship last year. So again, that's a potential advantage that Ferrari has that other teams don't, even if they don't get out of the blocks particularly quickly at the start of the year.
Scarbs, any feel on power unit, Ferrari power unit, where they're at?
Again, everything that's been said is good. Of course, everything that's been said has been said by Ferrari and their customer teams that have run it. But, the engine has been running lots of mileage. There's been no stoppages that I'm aware of. And yeah, we can't even think about times yet. But again, nothing's worrying us about this Ferrari engine. And that's as good as we can say about anyone at the moment when you look at maybe some of the other manufacturers that have struggled in these first few days of the shakedown.
But in general, reliability, touch wood's been pretty good, isn't it? I mean, if we go back to 2014, for example, in terms of the first run, power units in general, the whole battery electric thing, relatively trouble-free across the board.
Yeah, I think teams have learnt a lot from 2014 and indeed sort of 2009, going back to the previous big regulation change, and the teams are able to do much more complex stuff, not just with the power unit on the dyno, or indeed the entire powertrain on the dyno, but they have these virtual test tracks, and I'm sure we'll talk about those when we come to Williams, where they can put the chassis complete, everything that would be on that car running on a full car dyno, with the suspension and the brakes and the aero forces, as well as the powertrain running. So the teams have been so much better prepared. And while I think I am somewhat surprised that the majority of manufacturers have had a really clean start to the season. It just goes to show how professional Formula One is now when they're coming to getting these things ready.
Scarbs, I'm putting a picture on the screen now of the new McLaren just coming out of the garage. Any thoughts on that?
The McLaren's been interesting. They've kept it really hidden from us and releasing just a 3D model of it at the beginning of the week, which we always take with a pinch of salt. It turns out that model they released is relatively accurate to the car that's testing on the track. So credit to McLaren for that. I think McLaren maybe lose a few bonus points for being kind of so late to the party and being so secretive with everything, which I just don't think is necessary. Particularly with the relatively private shakedown test, although obviously every engineer and every Formula One team has got access to what's going on there. We don't. But the McLaren's interesting. I think at first you may look at it and think it's quite a conservative car. And I think, on the surface, that there it may be. It hides lots of lovely little details. So with the McLaren, I think the main thing is that they've kept the same front suspension that I might mention, this multi-link suspension at the front. Now, the trick for them for this year, obviously they've got a year of experience, is they've got to get that suspension tuned for both drivers, not just for Lando in one half of the year and for Oscar in the other half. It needs to suit both of them. And I'm sure that will create various other problems for McLaren as the year goes on, but that's a sporting side of it, not technical. So I'm really not worried about that. And then the detail of the car, they've got this very strange droopy nose. And it's hanging over a wing where if you look at the wing in the middle, it's very thin. and then it spans out quite broad towards the outer ends of the wing, and then you've got this really complicated end plate on the end of the wing, which looks like it's had a lot of development into it. Again, you can look at this very quickly and think, conventional. Yeah, there's a lot hidden there. So lots kind of on the front of the McLaren. If you look at their brake duct scoops on the front wheels, everyone else, Mercedes and Ferrari have kind of tucked them in behind that kind of crescent-shaped deflector on the front of the brake duct setup. McLaren have gone the opposite. They've put these big bulbous things, and McLaren have had form of doing something similar to this in previous years. It looks like they're using that not just to get lots of air into the brakes, which is obviously important, but I think they're using that brake duct scoop much more as an aerodynamic device than purely as a cooling device, which is, of course, completely legal, and everyone plays with it in different ways. The thing that surprised me most is when I first looked at the McLaren, these side pods, which kind of sloped away. I thought, well, they're not particularly exciting. But McLaren have got these very slopey side pods on the top, what you'd maybe call downwash side pods, quite slim, quite small. But underneath, the undercut is quite enormous and goes a long way back. Very similar to what people have been doing in previous years. Lots of people have brought that undercut forwards a little bit, because the undercut of the side pods is all about loading the front edge of the floor. And that's important because that creates you downforce at the front of the floor, which is always important that you get a balanced car, particularly with active aero. So when the drivers flatten the front and rear wings in straight line mode, that you still get a balance to the car as you go through the fast sweeping corners where you're allowed to use the straight line mode. So McLaren doing something slightly different there. Stuff at the back of the car has been a lot more hidden. Not enough photos obviously coming out from McLaren. They're not going to show us the back of the car. It doesn't look like they've got this hole in the diffuser. It doesn't look at this stage that they've got the same sort of slotted diffuser as we've seen with Ferrari and Mercedes in particular, and as I mentioned before already, Red Bull. But, kind of overall, it looks like this is, and I think the team have accepted that this is very much the car that they want to bring to the first race. It's all quite interesting, and it looks like they've just adopted some different ideas to everybody else. And I think if you kind of could ever do a spreadsheet of the different features of the cars and try and compare them in a kind of a purely logical way, I don't think any car would have all of the same features as you kind of look up and down it. You look at the wake boards behind the front tyres on the McLaren, quite different in what they're trying to load. Again, the front edge of the floor. Something they've done very similar is they've gone to push rod suspension back at the front. Again, this really isn't the be all and end all. It's something that we'll notice in these first few weeks and then forget about for the rest of the year. Seems to be the preferred solution, mainly because of aerodynamics. Don't listen to anyone else that's telling you that there's other benefits in there that are really worth pull rod over push rod. It is really just down to the packaging of the aero at the end of the day.
Interesting, you mentioned the deflectors behind the front wheels. Much nicer to see that than those ridiculous mudguards we had last year. I'm sure you agree.
I think they are more interesting because they are a team developed part. I wasn't that put out by the deflectors over the front wheels in 22 to 25. They served a purpose. But I think whenever you allow teams to design their own bodywork, even within very strict regulations that these wakeboards have, you end up with something quite interesting to look at. Now, these are trying to grab the dirty wake from behind the tyre and pull it into the bodywork of the tyre. And every team has got slightly different ideas of what you want to do with it. And, people start to call them upwash and outwash, which is technically correct. But even if you've got an outwashing wakeboard design, it's still generally pulling the airflow in towards the center of the car in order that the car behind sits in much cleaner air. And that seems to have been something the rules have got to quite quickly. McLaren have got quite an interesting one. A lot of people may denigrate it because it doesn't look like the same as others. I think they're doing something quite different. I think they're trying to create some low pressure behind the big flat board and pull air out from underneath the floor, which is, just a different way of tackling the aero across the entire car. But yeah, I'm kind of glad they're there. A lot of people have been quite upset about them because they're so wide and they're kind of a little bit in your face compared with the old barge boards. And certainly they're going to sustain some damage in, wheel to wheel racing, which has kind of been the case with any part of the car over 10, 20 years or more. The strange thing with these parts is they actually kind of damage the car's airflow. They're there to actually make the car sit in its own dirty air. So if you did have one of them smash off in a race, the question that sits in my mind, does that make the car better or
Better.
worse? I don't know. Probably better. Maybe. I don't know. But
Mm.
yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see just how these parts is probably one of the key parts that we'll be keeping an eye on throughout the year, along with front wing end plates, I suspect, is one of the key development areas.
Yeah, and I can see why people probably object to them, but I think it's nice to have open wheels again. Let's face it, they are open wheelers. That's what we Aussies call them anyway. And beyond that, just on that point, if they do get knocked off or damaged, it might actually improve performance. Of course, we had that with Charles Leclerc in China, I think last year, did we not? When he lost a front wing end plate and seemed to go quicker as a result, even then.
Yes, I mean, I think there's probably as much of a psychological as a technical argument as to why cars sometimes go quicker with bits of bodywork missing. There's been a number of situations where drivers seem to have outdriven what should have been a much better car when it was damaged.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, we can look at the front wing, which again is a little bit susceptible to damage in accident, in wheel-to-wheel racing. But again, we've had wide front wings since I'm trying to remember what was it 2009 when they first went the full width of the car. So yeah, nothing new there, and it's down to the drivers to avoid hitting each other. It's part of racing.
It is.
So yeah, it's just one of those things. You're never going to stop people rubbing bodywork against each other in racing.
Scars, we're going to go through more cars, don't worry, but we got a bunch of questions and comments. I know everybody's desperate to sort of try to have their say. So we're talking about airflow. So we'll kick off with this one from Aaron, who's one of our regulars. Hi, Peter and Scarbs. Given the complexity and unpredictability of airflow over Formula One cars, to what extent does luck, as opposed to engineering skill, determine the aerodynamic performance of ... I think there's another part to this question. Let's have a look. As he goes back into his chat box again, usual old drama. Well, I think we can just go from that
Yeah,
one actually, and just what is your reaction to that one? Luck or judgment? Do you think that some of it is luck, Scarbs? In fact,
I think as much as I at heart I'm an engineer and I laud the engineers and the designers and the technicians and the mechanics and everyone that works on that side of the sport. I know of situations where teams have had success and they've not entirely been able to explain it. So yeah, maybe there is luck in there somewhere,
yeah,
but you can't look at it, an aero team of 3, 4, 500 people and think that finding the right solution is anything but luck. It's all down to just diligent work and discipline. But maybe someone had that flash of an idea that works and somebody else didn't. You can't look at every solution in the wind tunnel or in CFD. So, there is a random element. And, when you get to the circuit, much as we did back in, 2022, everyone was expecting Mercedes to dominate, but Mercedes had that glitch in the wind tunnel and the car just didn't work as they expected it to. And it wasn't about that poor design. It was just about, they were blindsided by some of the data that was being fed in to this massive decision-making machine that you get in the design office and the aero departments of F1 teams. So yes, it's too early to say. I think Bahrain will soon start to shake out teams that have done better and have done worse or have, really fallen down. And yeah, there's many reasons to it. And I guess, I mean, luck is, preparation and opportunity is the way I often describe it. So, if a team hasn't done the right preparation or, someone else has had a better idea, then you will miss out.
another question for you, Scarbs. Scarbs, have you heard anything positive or negative from teams about the open source scheme where teams' designs are distributed to all the other teams? What do you and Peter think of the idea? Well, I'm going to see what Scarbs thinks of that idea.
I mean, I think it's been a success. So open source, just for people that maybe don't quite understand, is in the 2022 regulations, they broke up all the different parts of the cars into different parts. So parts like Haas would buy from Ferrari, and then you have listed parts where a team has to make them themselves, things like the monocoque, the bodywork, stuff like that. And then there's open source parts. So one of the classic parts of that is the brake caliper. So originally there was going to be a spec brake caliper back in 2022, but of course every team wanted their little advantage. Now, as much as every brake caliper across the grid is made by the Brembo group, either by Brembo itself or by AP Racing, the teams are actually able to work with Brembo and design a completely different caliper to everybody else's. Now, that could become a bit of an arms race. So what the FIA did is made brake calipers open source. So somewhere in the world, all of the F1 engineers have access to a CAD server and can go and look at each other's brake calipers. So that no one can really kind of invest in some big idea that other teams couldn't immediately grab hold of and copy. And I think that's been absolutely fantastic. You know, it stops people developing money in areas where the teams or the FIA don't really want you to waste money because, you know, they want the stuff that's kind of sexy and exciting in front of house. Brake calipers maybe aren't. Lots of other bits of the car equally are on the open source list. So I think it's been a success. I've certainly never heard anyone from teams being, you know, negative about it. I think it served its purpose.
Good. Well, I agree with all of that, Scarbs. Thank you very much. And we'll have a lot more questions and comments coming in. But before we do that, let's have a look now at the RB22 Red Bull, a much awaited car, the weapon of preferred choice of Max Verstappen in 2026. What do you reckon about it, Scarbs?
This is a really interesting car. Again, it's got lots of really quite neat aero features. You know, sort of front to back. The front wing of the nose really isn't that exciting. You know, there's not much to write about there. Switched push rod again. Side pods and really where all the talk is about with this car. Very narrow at the front, tapered ever so slightly outwards, which is interesting. And you know, they're just working the air in different ways to everyone else. Big roll hoop inlet. So I think the side pods on the Red Bull just have oil and water radiators for the engine. Everything else is at the back, which means they've probably changed to a 3D printed intercooler as well, taking that bulk out of the side pods. But when you look at the cars, particularly around that kind of the cockpit and the Coke bottle area of the side pods, you look at them and you think, wow, this looks very newish. And then you look at other aspects of the car and, you know, it doesn't have that flow to it. So you can see it's a car that's maybe a little bit disjointed between, you know, what Adrian started before he left Red Bull and, you know, with the final solution they've ended up with. But it's looking to be a really interesting car. Again, they've switched to the multi-link front suspension. They've got their own powertrain, which is, you know, a big step for them. And again, so far, nothing negative coming out on that story. It all seems to be working very well. You know, the VCarb team as well are equally running that power unit with, you know, with no issues. Everything's kind of looking good. Again, no red flags. Looks like they've done more than enough to be competitive compared with what they are. But, you know, they've got the biggest recovery for Red Bull isn't necessarily in the detailed design or in the suspension, but it's actually having that car work on track as they expect it to in the wind tunnel. Again, this kind of long-standing correlation discussion. And, you know, that's what let them down last year. They were looking to have a really competitive last year, but the car just wasn't working. And eventually they worked out, again, wind tunnel glitch, no correlation. They got that sorted out towards the end of the year. You could see that the car was working very much as they would have liked. Has that carried through into the new year? Well, we would hope so. The regulations with the new floors that are no longer the full ground effect floors should suit them better, as it does with Mercedes. So yeah, again, it's looking as though we will have, you know, a competitive top four this year, and no one at this stage has kind of dropped out of that.
Everybody seems to be running a bit of a shark fin at the back of the engine cover now, Scarbs. What's that all
It's
about?
part of the regulations. They've regulated in a minimum shark fin area, and I think what they've left us with is quite inelegant, really. I think they could have given teams a little bit more freedom. Everyone's effectively running the same shark fin. You have to run, you know, in a certain shadow area that it's got to meet. There's not a lot you can do with it. Ferrari were interesting. They put these little steps on just to break the vortex that forms as the car kind of slides in to keep the rear wing working. We'll probably see various solutions to that as we have in the past, like Williams T-top to the shark fin, or if you can remember Force India having the Stegosaurus with all the little fins going along it. I'm not sure if that's possible under these regulations, but teams will work to try and get that to work best as possible for them. But as I say, particularly when the car is in yaw, because it gets in the way of the rear wing working on both sides. So yeah, we'll probably have some interesting little developments in that area.
Question from, or comment from, let's go up to get it here. Ashad Chowdhury, another of our regulars. Hi there. Audi's start does not look promising. Cadillac is slow, but seem to be managing their outings well. Williams' decision not to test does not seem prudent. What are your thoughts? And are we going to add Aston Martin to that as well now? Are we expecting to see them on day
We're
four?
expecting to see them, I think, potentially tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
which is Thursday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these are big regulation changes. You know, the budget cap has been biting, the aero development cap has been biting, you know, all of those regulations to control how mad the teams can go. Unfortunately, you know, with a big regulation change and those caps, it's difficult. And teams, for various reasons, have had problems. Cadillac, um, interesting car. They're slow. They're not trying to get performance out of that car. That's literally a brand new team. And you've got to remember that there's a lot of stuff on that car that just needs to be proven to work. And Cadillac seems to be going through that very methodically. Audi, on the other hand, Audi, you take them as a as a manufacturer, hugely, you know, a huge amount of ability and development potential in them as a manufacturer. And then obviously they're sitting on top of the Sauber infrastructure. Sauber have been developing cars for many years, so they should have an advantage. The fact that they've had so many stoppages, and whereas I don't think these are complete power unit failures rather than cutouts stopping the car on track, is a bit surprising, in some respects, because of the history of both of the sides of that team now. But again, hugely complicated cars, first time they've run. Yes, little problems will happen. And as much as one wire, having a problem will stop a complete Formula One car, as it will do with many racing cars nowadays. So, that's a factor there. Williams, clearly they're in all sorts of problems through development. And it's nothing we haven't seen from Williams before. They've still got a lot more maturing to do as even with James Vowles on board. Last year they were late. A couple of years ago they were late. It's the same problems that haven't been ironed out at Williams yet. And Aston Martin, I think, are a different story, because they're now the Adrian Newey team, and he's going to leave it to the absolute last minute before he signs anything off for manufacturing and production, so that car is the best it can possibly be at every point it turns up on track. So different stories, but all part of this kind of same sort of melange of regulations and cost caps.
Yeah, and I'm surprised that Aston Martin aren't there. In a way, I'm not, because you would imagine that Adrian's probably, trying to get
It's a
everything as
balance.
trying to
Yeah.
get everything as perfect as he possibly can, or whatever the goal is there. But even so, it's kind of strange that they wouldn't be running. Williams kind of predictable in a way, sadly, but yeah, for Aston Martin not to be there, I suppose that's Williams can at least say, well, Aston didn't make it either. And I guess that's another reason to justify this decision not to let the fans come to Barcelona. I mean, let's just think about that a little bit, because the weather's been terrible. Well, not on the first day. It was wet yesterday, very windy and difficult today. Wouldn't have been the greatest experience for the fans, but nonetheless, what are your thoughts on that, Scarbs? Do you think it should have been the public should have been allowed out?
Absolutely. There's no question that should have been a properly open test. I can understand that the teams wanted some secrecy, thinking back to 2014, which was, a complete mess. But that's proven not to be the case. I think the media should be there. The fans, not let the fans see cars running. Only being able to go to Bahrain for seeing F1 testing. My F1 career as a journalist, if we can call myself that, started at just going to testing. And there was always people in the fans in the stands at Silverstone, in Barcelona, Jerez, everywhere else we used to go. It should be open. Formula One should. And I always have felt that testing has been that kind of last hidden secret, that last gem of the true F1 fan. So I think that's been a mistake. But I don't think the impact of it, sadly, will be forgotten about within a week or two, certainly as we get to the first race. And you've got to remember last year they had that launch event in London, which was bizarre and the complete antithesis of what I wanted from Formula One and seeing new cars. But they're trying things, and it's the marketing department controlling things rather than anything else.
Yeah, we've got a comment here about Williams from Consequence of Living. Williams! Exclamation mark. What are they doing? How can you skip 2 years and still not have a car ready for testing? And is a 20 to 30 kilo and is 20 to 30 kilo overweight? Really? I'm more
I think
embarrassed for
that's
Carlos. Where's that come from?
yeah. I think the excess weight is certainly a rumor that's been put around and has been
Fake
quashed
news,
by the
fake
team.
news.
Crash tests were delayed. Maybe they've added weight. But I think 20 to 30 is sounds absurd. Yeah, I think a lot of teams may be overweight at the start of the year, whether they choose to be or you can make things lighter, but you can't make a car quicker in some respects. Yeah, Williams. Again, it's a team that have struggled for so many years, and I think it just goes to show how difficult it is to turn a team around under the cost cap regulations, underneath the aero testing, and just how far a team can slip away from being, I still call them Williams Grand Prix Engineering. I think that's still maybe
Yeah,
even their
absolutely.
formal
Totally
titles.
agree.
They've always been an engineering company, but I think that's been lost in recent years, and I think it will improve. But this is another difficult year for Williams, and it's disappointing. I think everyone, whether you are a Williams fan or not, want to see some of these older teams be successful. No one wants to see a team struggle, so it's hard to watch.
Bit of an
Definitely.
insult right at the end there, saying even Alpine are better. Well, Alpine not such a bad team, and I'm an avowed Pierre Gasly fan. So, what do we think about the new Alpine there, Scarbs? Got a nice picture of it going into
Yeah,
left-hander
the
in
Alpine's
Barcelona.
interesting. I mean, we've not heard a lot from Alpine. I don't quite know where that car is in their thinking going forwards into the first part of the season. In a lot of respects, of all the cars that I've seen, it's the one I'm most disappointed with. It's got some really lovely features. The front wing is really interesting. You can see that they've put some thought into the shape of that front wing. If you see it lifts up very much at the leading edge of the front wing towards the end plates, which really takes the load off, but opens up airflow underneath to work with the end plate to manage that front tire wake. So it's something no one else has been playing with.
Yeah,
The
and
rest of the
sorry.
rest of the car is kind of almost is about as vanilla as I think you could probably make a 2026 brand new car. I'm hoping that the work that they've done under the skin, obviously they switched to the Mercedes power unit, which is fantastic for them. Oh right, I'm sorry, I've just got a battery warning on my phone, which is strange.
Oh, have you?
I'll keep talking, and I may have to switch back on in a second.
Okay.
Um, yeah, we know that they went really well with the Mercedes power unit under as Lotus. And it's a team I want to see improve. Their last year was terrible. Again, they've played around with the front suspension like everyone else has done. Looks like they've put a lot of development. Maybe the development that we can see is in the chassis, and they've got a lot more to come. So, the topic on that is kind of open to discussion as we go forward through the year. But fingers crossed that they will certainly improve over what I can see so far.
Yeah, in their defense, I would say probably they've just focused on getting the power unit switch sorted and then they'll start to get to work on the car because it's quite a big thing.
Absolutely.
Even if they know
Yeah.
Mercedes as a company, it's still,
Mhm.
I mean, just on that subject, Scarbs, I'm not answering this question yet, but we'll get onto it in a
Mhm.
second. Have you got any feel for how much difference there is in architecture from, say, a factory team like Mercedes and maybe McLaren or some of the other Mercedes teams? How much are the teams playing around with positioning of things they can play around with? I don't know, battery location, turbos, whatever it is.
And most of the structure on the engine, the turbo and that's all fixed by the manufacturer. Teams can't
Mm,
do it. The regulations don't allow them to. Battery position probably is a little bit variable, but you haven't got a lot of scope to move it now because you've got a much smaller fuel tank. So there's not much they can do. Most of the engine mapping is done by the manufacturer, but how they then choose to play with the energy, in particular, which would be the big kind of battleground for this year, is partly down to the team. So you could find a team with identical power units have very different ways of operating that around the lap because they want to, recover energy in some areas and deploy it in others. So that will change between the manufacturers.
So here's another question or comment, really. I think consequences of living
Mhm.
again. From what I've seen and heard so far in Barcelona, all the cars are incredibly nervous and unstable at the back. First of all, we need to know, have you heard anything along those lines? And bear in mind, of course, the weather hasn't been great, and you're seeing
Yeah.
a lot of cars
Yeah.
having a bit of a glitch coming out of a slow corner with oversteer.
Oh,
I shouldn't read too much into that, I don't think. Scarbs, you just disappeared picture-wise. Is that okay? Hello? We seem to have lost Scarbs. What's going on there? I think his battery's gone down, isn't he? Oh dear, oh dear. Oh well, that doesn't matter. These we're live. I'm sure he'll buzz me back on WhatsApp in a second. He did say the battery was going down, but I'll take this opportunity to answer some other questions that have been coming in from the start. This is from Zabij Dugal. Where are we? Let's get the browser up here going. Here we go. Hi, Peter. Just wanted to ask why the short corners are better than long corners. And if they're so much better, why don't all the drivers just drive with short corners? Well, not all drivers have the ability to create short corners the way Max Verstappen does, because, as I've said many times, you need incredible sensitivity, suppleness, feel for the surface of the road. You're basically managing a multitude of dynamic weights as you're going into the corner, and it's keeping that corner platform as stable as possible so that you can have a really efficient rotation at exactly the right moment, which is probably different every lap on every corner because of the way the car's evolving and changing in the course of its running. So that's a very special talent, and in any given era, the most I think Formula One history has ever seen, probably 4 to 5 drivers only who have a talent of that level to be able to create short corners. Now, not all drivers with talent at that level then think that the way to drive is the way Max and Charles drive, which is to shorten the corner as much as possible, rotation point in the middle. Because in the days of Fangio, in the days of Sterling Moss, the tyres were very different, and you could do a lot more with the tyres and get away with it. So short corners weren't necessarily the thing in those days. Although Jim Clark and Sterling and probably Fangio, I never really saw Fangio drive, but I mean he had all the skill set. Well, I didn't see Fangio drive, but Sterling and Jimmy did turn in early. But then you got a driver like Ayrton Senna who didn't, and that's because Senna was a different sort of guy altogether. He certainly had the same skill set as Max Verstappen in terms of absolute perfection in so many areas, but he also had other things, and it comes down to this business of throttle. He loved to blip the throttle before he got on the final, when he could, to find the moment when he could get onto the throttle and keep his foot there. He didn't have the feel for it as Max does. He always had to blip it, and it became a habit, a bit like getting the yips in putting. He always had that, and he never got rid of that. And it served him quite well in the turbo era when throttle lag became a bit of an issue, but it was there long before he drove turbo cars. And then beyond that, he had this thing which I've spoken about, just a very good insight into the way he drove. He would always refuse to jump gear shifts going down with a manual shift. He would always go 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He'd never go 6, 4, 2, 1, as many drivers did. They jumped to shift. And that's because Ayrton just wanted everything to be perfect. And if you think about that search for perfection, it kind of figures that he would want to do the perfect classical lap as well. Brake as late as possible without disturbing the car, take a perfect geometric apex through the corners, and have a perfect exit, missing the wall by 1/4 of a millimeter on exit. That was Ayrton Senna. It was in a way he was creating the most difficult scenario around which he could display and use his skills. Whereas Max just does the obvious thing. He's got the same skill set as Senna, but he just shortens the corner, and it gives him much more margin for error in doing that, because he's anticipating, he's manipulating the car, he's anticipating what he's going to do, and he's not running right at the edge of turn-in points, and he's not braking absolutely as late as he possibly can in order to pick up a little bit more speed. All he's interested in when he's braking is stability and getting to the rotation point. And sometimes that adds up to late braking, sometimes it doesn't. So everybody's different is the answer. But going back to my original point, I would say only maximum 5 in any given era have the ability to create short corners if they wanted to. But good question. Thank you very much. And now another one. No word yet from Scarbs. I think I might actually give him a ring on WhatsApp while we're doing this. Where are we? Next one is from Sarosh Soman, one of our regulars. Sarosh, let me just dial up Scarbs, see what's going on. He may say no more battery. Well, if he's got no battery, he ain't going to answer this, is he? So Peter, helmet cam onboard max lap Dutch Grand Prix, thought it gave a better perspective on how he drives than the usual onboards. I was able to relate this positioning better in the corners. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people talk about that. I actually find those helmet cams a bit sick making, but that's just me, you know, all that business of leaning like that and the vibration and stuff. And the only thing I'm slightly skeptical about is that although it's a helmet cam, we're not actually seeing what he sees. It doesn't take into account peripheral vision. And so you're not actually seeing the whole picture. And I know it's great television and I know it looks dramatic and it's all over the place and it's reality TV and all that. But I would still rather have the normal set piece camera on top of the roll structure looking down on the driver so we can see as much of the track as possible and see therefore where he's positioning the car. That's just me. I'm just going to see whether Scarbs has reappeared on any of the other pictures. He doesn't seem to have. No, it seems to be me on both. Oh, well, it was good while it lasted. We got through most of it actually with Scarbs, I think, didn't we? Let me think what we didn't get through. We didn't really talk about the Haas, but we can do that later. And here, let me just say thank you very much, Scarbs. If you're still watching, I know what happened. The battery went down and these things do happen. And in fact, I would say I'm rather glad that Scarbs had a technical problem rather than, I'm sure we've still got some here, but you know, I'm not the only person on the planet Earth that has these technical issues sometimes. Sarosh Som, another one. Peter, question on life. Wow. The clerk's weakness is his emotions getting the better of him. If I apply that to life in general, how would you practice or cut off to make better use of emotions in one's life? Well, emotions are a very important thing, like anger, like the will to survive and live. All those things are part of our human nature, and emotion is, yeah, very important in so many ways. How would you channel that? A lot of it is self-discipline and auto-suggestion, and it's being in an environment, in Charles' case, where he doesn't need to worry about things and he can just focus on his driving. It's as simple as that. It's not sports psychology. Nothing is needed there. He just needs to be in an environment where, well, it could happen at Ferrari. If the Ferrari's good and he's winning Grand Prix pretty regularly and potentially the World Championship, believe me, he won't become very emotional as a racing driver. He'll just focus on the job 100%. It's when things are going off the rails that he becomes more susceptible to these things that have, you know, part of his baggage in his life, much more than say Max does when his car's not going very well. And it'll be interesting to see, you know, if McLaren have some bad weekends, how those two guys cope with it. But I think it's that with Charles. We don't read too much into it. He just needs to be in a proper racing car where he doesn't have to, you know, scratch around to drive the perfect lap to get on the front row of the grid and then have the tires go off after 7 laps when, you know, the car next to him is going exactly the same speed and it's got perfect rubber. That's what he doesn't need. I'm just going to try old Scarbs again, see what's going on here. Maybe he's waiting for the Zoom call to be, or I mean, he will be waiting for the Zoom call to be Hello, Scarbs. Hello, mate.
Literally, I've gone from a full battery and my phone's red hot and dead.
Well, that's what we kind of thought, Scarbs. So don't worry about it. Don't worry. I've just been rambling on about some of the questions here. But I tell you what, rather than go through the rigmarole of redoing the Zoom call and all that, I'll just keep you online now, if that's okay. Yeah. Okay. There's one super chat that's just come up. I'll just deal with that and then we'll get on with finishing what we were talking about with the other cars. Yeah, okay. So this one is from Paulo Souza. Hi, Peter. I was at Daytona this weekend watching the race, and all I could think of were the different racing lines drivers took and the things you've taught us about short corners. Thank you. Oh, well, that's very kind of you to say so. Yeah, they are very different. I mean, everybody's different. As I say, every driver is different, and you see so much. If you're looking for it, there's a lot of differences between the skill sets of all the drivers, and that's actually a picture of Daytona 26. And just a shout out actually to some of my mates who did well in Daytona this year, because Felipe Nasra, about whom we were talking in the previous live stream, he actually won it, which was great, driving the for Penske in the Porsche, so he won it. And then second place, my mate Jack Aitken, who of course used to be George Russell's teammate in GP2, GP3, finished second in the Cadillac with Fred Vesti. So good for those two guys. Robin Frins, another guy I've known for many years, who was super good in Formula Renault, very good on the way up, finished third overall. Nick Yellerly, another of my mates, finished fifth in the Honda Acura. Louis Delatraz, another friend in the other Cadillac with Colton Herder, was sixth. And K-Mag was eighth in a BMW. So good to see that all those mates and people from many of them should have been in Formula One and aren't, that they're having fun in Daytona. But I'm glad you, Paolo, had fun. Anyway, Scarbs, getting back to you. We were talking about Alpine. I'm just going to put a picture of the Haas on screen now. It's a sort of braking shot going into the hairpin actually after the back straight at Barcelona. Any thoughts on the Haas Ferrari?
Yeah, I mean, we spoke a bit about the Alpine before I got cut off. The Haas is that other kind of yardstick car. It's kind of what you would expect a 2026 car to look like. They've taken the more bulky side pod option. With side pods, a lot of people think if you've got a big side pod, you need lots. It's because you need lots of cooling. It's not necessarily the case. Like we saw under the previous set of regulations, you can actually use the side pod shape to act a bit like a barge board to keep that front tire weight away from the rest of the car. It's almost like it's kind of shouldering it out of the way, quite literally, with the bodywork. And the other option you've got is you just shrink the side pod down to nothing, like so many teams have chosen to do. Well, for me, quite surprisingly this year, I didn't think that would be a way that would work with all of that dirty tire weight coming over. But clearly, the results in CFD and the wind tunnels have proven me wrong. Overall, the Haas, it seemed to have gone straight out with that Ferrari power unit and is running reliably. We know that take a lot of the hardware from Ferrari, so they have Ferrari's front suspension, and again, nothing from the drivers suggesting that the handling from having that suspension is wayward at all. I think I just got cut off as one of the questions was asking about the various cars handling, and I think it's way too early to talk about that on a freezing cold, wet, windy Catalunya circuit. But we have to remember that these cars have got a lot more torque coming out of corners. So when they may look wayward on corner exit, that's probably a lot more to do with the amount of torque coming from the hybrid system than anything else. But Haas kind of had a bit of a resurrection through last year, didn't they? They kind of reached rock bottom in previous seasons, and last year, I think, was the first year where we'd seen another kind of step improvement from them. So I'm hoping we will see that again this year. The car seems to support that thinking. But there's so many other factors that they need to go their way to start to have sort of a level of success in what is this year looking to be an extremely competitive midfield. It's going to be very difficult to stand out. A lot of it is going to come down to you're talking about driving. It's going to come down to who avoids the incidents at the first lap and when trying to get past the slower car.
Yeah, we'll say that again. Interesting questions come up, Scarbs, from Luke the Truth. Honda is investing heavily on solid state batteries, and recently they hinted about introducing something special. Is it just a weight advantage there that gives them enormous flexibility to fix a COG problem? I mean, I would imagine if you're getting the fluids out of there, that's also quite good in terms of reliability, isn't it? And potential things that can always go wrong.
I mean, I think from where you look at conventional cells, a solid state cell, and again, this is far from my expert subject, are better in lots of ways. They are smaller and lighter, more efficient, but slightly easier to cool, I believe, as well. All of that works in any battery, in anything from a torch to a Formula One car or a road EV. I heard nothing on the grapevine that solid state cells are coming to F1. Having said that, in the years that we've had, let's see, 2009, when we first had the KERS battery on board, we've heard almost nothing about the battery and particularly about the cells involved and how they're arranged and cooled. And there's lots of hearsay and there's lots of sort of mentions about very broad technologies, but we know very little about F1 batteries, which I think is an absolute shame. I mean, there's all this technology
Mm,
putting into the sport and not shouting about it.
mm,
I mean, what are their marketing departments thinking of?
yeah.
So the simple answer is I don't know if Honda are bringing it. Looking at the size of the battery they showed on their launch version of their power unit, I suspect not in that one at least, because that looked way oversized, and it was probably a very early pre-production version of the power unit and the hybrid system, particularly with the energy store. So yeah, watch this space. If it is anyone that does it, at least if it's Honda, we will hear about it eventually. Because Honda are probably the only power unit supplier that have been very open about all the technology within their power units, from the hybrid system to the engine, and even in previous years into the gearbox as well. So yeah, it's a case of watch this space, and hopefully we will hear something.
Yeah, and just to finish Luke the Truth's point, he's saying if they did go to solid state, would that then give them more flexibility on the position of the center of gravity?
Well, the center of gravity of an F1 car is defined within the regulations within about 1% or 10 kilograms, if I remember. Having a smaller battery is definitely an advantage. Having a lighter battery, it's Formula One. I mean, I think there is a regulation that limits it, and I'm trying to remember what the regulation is now. I think it's like something like 34 kilograms. I could be wrong, from 20. Uh, but yeah, I mean, it's Formula One. Anything that's smaller, lighter, stiffer, has less friction, will go on an F1 car, and the battery meets, at least a couple of those requirements. So yeah, it would be very attractive. Whether this is the year they do it, I don't know.
Another one, Scarbs from Addyboy 0190. Hi, Peter and Craig. With the return to flat floor, do you think the no pod concept would work now, since the floor of the no pod paired with the Venturi tunnels was producing too much downforce?
Sorry, I'm laughing. I think a lot of people conflated Mercedes problems back in 2022 with the side pod and the floor. The problem was with the floor. The side pod was a solution, no better or worse than any other ones, and no more likely to be better or worse with the current regulations. Yes, under the current regulations, a zero pod, as I think a lot of us called it, or the no pod, um, would work under these regulations. You have to change it ever so slightly, because the front of the side pod, you can remember Mercedes made a bit of a fin out the front of the side pod where the side impact structure comes out from the top of the cockpit. You can't quite do that now. You can have the side impact structure coming out like we saw on the Red Bull with their super slim side pods, but that's not really the point. The main benefit, as I recall from the zero pods, is that they spread out very wide towards the edge of the floor. And that, as we were talking about the Red Bull earlier, loads the front of the floor up to give you a much more balanced downforce from the underfloor. And that would have worked with the ground effect cars. It would have worked with the current flat step bottom floors as we'll have this year. So there's no reason it wouldn't work with some adaptation. A lot of people will probably point at Red Bull and say it's a zero pod. I think it's something in between the two. But yeah, it's a concept that could work. I think everyone's probably parked that for the time being. They're looking at maybe one of the two key kind of design concepts of either the big bulky one or the smaller unswept side pod.
Yeah. Luke the Truth says he's 100% sure Toyota will buy Haas and return to Formula One with an engine partnership with Haas shortly. Toyota has unlimited access to Ferrari engines in the meantime. Yeah, it could happen. I think the way personally, I think the way Toyota are doing that marriage with Haas suggests that Haas have a good relationship with Toyota and they're getting everything they can out of Toyota, short of Toyota having to go through the whole nasty business of putting together a Formula One team and go through all those agonies. And it's a really nice thing for them to have that deal with Haas in terms of engineers, young driver programs. And I think you see that going on with Cali Rovanpera right now. I mean, they're basically managing Rovanpera's career, hopefully into Formula One. And just on that point, Scarbs, if you can just hang fire for 2 seconds, I've also got a picture of Cali in the currently in the New Zealand series where he's racing very well. And it was wet. The round three was wet, and he actually got a podium finish, and he's right up there. In the dry, he's been, as you would expect, struggling a little bit, but going quite well. And Toyota fixed that up for him, and he's going to be doing Super Formula in Japan this year. It's a big ask for him to go well, but in my opinion, he's definitely worth watching. And I think it's the new Toyota look of how they're going to go about this whole business of single seater racing and working with drivers and engineers as distinct from maybe putting their own team together. So I don't know what you think about that and what the people on the ground, your opinion is, but that's mine. I think they'll stay with the Haas deal as it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think Toyota are a very different company now, or Toyota Motorsport Europe, or whatever their formal title is. Very different to how they were when they left Formula One, and they've become the kind of the racing operation that maybe they always should have been. Success in rallying in the WEC, and yeah, I think that, yeah, I agree with you. They're being very canny about how they step forwards in this, and I think that the roadmap for Toyota is much longer than a rush in to become a full manufacturer and team entrant. Um, I think that, at some point, you've got to remember Toyota and the operation that I have at Cologne. I mean, I've not been there for many years, but I know it is phenomenal. They've not just, they're not just an engine manufacturer. They've got, probably one of the best wind tunnels in the world. They've got simulators. They've got all of the other chassis and simulation tools that any Formula One team would dream of having access to. They've got all of that ready. So they could go a long way down the road by being badged as Haas or potentially as Toyota at some stage. And they don't even then at that point have to come in as an engine manufacturer.
Mm.
They could come potentially later than Toyota being a formal entrant in Formula One as a constructor, as it were. Because, Aston Martin are running a Honda, McLaren, who make their own engines for their road cars, are running Mercedes. I think this idea that, you've got to make your own engine is, lots of areas of motorsport now is becoming a lot more blurred. And I can't really explain why that would be, because we've all got more access than ever to the information, but maybe just the way people consume their motorsport is like, I don't really care what engine's in there,
Mm.
So
Yeah.
we've got a great looking car with a fantastic livery on the Haas this year, probably the best looking car out there, certainly the one that pops most out when you look at it. Yeah, it's a long road. Personally, I'd love to see Toyota back in Formula One. Despite some failings of them in their previous time in Formula One, I think they were overall a positive influence on the sport, and it'd be nice to have them back.
Yeah, I agree with you. Scarbs, oh, where's that chat box gone? It's all happening, isn't it? Some guy only has said, "Rest in peace, Scarbs' phone, R.I.P." Any further news exactly on what happened there?
I don't know. When it rebooted, it said that there was a software update. So it's either the fact I have my new camera or there was a software update. But when I mean, it's cool now, but it was absolutely red hot.
Oh, there you go.
But it's working fine.
Good.
And I'll just be forewarned next time we do this.
Well, it seems to me that your phone is a little bit like the Rob Wilson Nokia, which is sort of 18 years old now, but still carries on in some respect. Um,
Well, I have to point out this is less than a year old, and
okay, well there you go. That's Samsung. Good,
yeah,
no, good phones, good
it's
phones.
been much of a workout in the past year.
Right.
So I've been learning the
A super chat from Kevin Kawara says, "Where is Aldo Costa, one of the genius of the sports?" I think Aldo's at Dallara, is he not?
I think he kind of sidestepped into the Mercedes
Yeah,
consulting business, which for the life of me now I can't remember. Applied technology or something like that, wasn't it?
and I think
I
he then
think
went to Dallara. I think.
I think he has gone to Dallara. Formula One is a full-on business to work in at any level. From
Mm,
garage technician up to drivers, team principals, and certainly the technical staff. I think a change of scene, a change of pace, a reduction in travel is attractive for a lot of people after a while in Formula One. So yeah, he's missed. He brought a lot to the sport in the time he was with us.
he did.
It's two big the two big teams he was at. And yeah, he's enjoying a World Serve rest, and why not?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Watley Tom, can we discuss suspension, please? I assume lots of ground effect might mean more. Sorry, I assumed the loss of ground effect might mean more compliance, but the cars seem as stiff as ever.
I think there's a bit of a glide path between where we were last year and where the cars will settle down as we get into the season. Last year's car, because of the ground effect and the incredibly low ride heights and the incredible sensitivity of the floor to ride height changes, everything became rock hard. This year, again, we can't look at the cars at this stage and start to talk about handling. It's just way too early and just too many other factors confusing it. The cars will become more compliant. We've already seen cars running with a lot more ride height generally. Certainly, cars running with a lot of rake. McLaren, in particular, turned up today with a huge amount of rake, which is always kind of hard to judge because when you're on wet, the overall ride height becomes much higher because the tyres are bigger in diameter and therefore, the rake looks more pronounced. But I think we will go back towards more compliant cars, and that will just be the work of the engineers and the seven post rig people and the drivers and all the other simulations going and saying, let's try it this, let's try it this. I think eventually we'll go back to cars that were, we never spoke about suspension compliance up until 2022. So I think that's just a topic that will go away as we get to learn these cars.
Good. Beyond Vibes TV, what about the Mercedes front wing? What could they be trying to do with that?
So the Mercedes front wing is different to everyone else's in one odd detail. So regulations now means that you have three elements to your front wing. So you have what we used to call the main plane and then the two flaps behind it. One or two of those flaps behind the main plane of the wing will open up in straight line mode for active aero, which is it looks like DRS, but is now the kind of that you'll get that every lap in order to reduce the drag of the car to get the most out of the power units. So what Mercedes have done in different to everyone else is they've actually mounted the nose and the pylons to that middle element. That means, therefore, the main plane in front of that is completely disconnected. So that works ever so slightly better because it hasn't got the obstruction of the pylons attached to it. That means only the rearmost flap opens or closes, depending on which way you want to put it, with active aero, which means that you would have a smaller drag reduction effect, a smaller downforce change effect than you would with having potentially two flaps opening. Again, it all depends on the detailed design of these flaps. I don't think this is a thing. I think Mercedes have just found maybe that they want a different balance when active aero opens. And it's probably partly to do with the performance of their floor and how much balance that gives you. And I wouldn't be surprised if at some races they switch to a more conventional front wing mounting where both flaps opened up. So it's interesting. No one else so far has turned up with one of them. Um, And yeah, it just goes to show that, even though all of these teams have done, all these thousands of hours of development and millions of simulations, that they're all coming up with quite different concepts. And it will probably be a couple of years before everyone settles down, as they do in every regulation set, to, very much one homogeneous design.
Scarbs, one of the cars we didn't get to talk about before your battery gave up was the V-Carb 03 Racing Bulls Ford. What, anything to say about that? We got a nice overhead shot of the car taken from above the garage, it's leaving the garage.
And it's an eye-catching car, not just because of its lovely white livery, which I don't think is as nice as last year's, but I'm not here to talk about liveries. It's it's quite clear that it is not the twin of the Red Bull. It has the same powertrain, it has the same front and rear suspension, but from there you can see that both teams have gone in slightly different directions, or at least maybe there was a fork in the road down one direction they followed. So the key thing that when you look at the V-carb is you can't help but notice the roll hoop inlet, which is massive. And historically, I was looking at some photos from the F1 launch back in 2014, and they had massive roll hoop inlet back then, and obviously had them various points in years gone by. So again, it goes back to how we were talking about how the Red Bull cools the car. So things that you need to cool in an F1 car, you have the combustion engine with its oil and water. You have the oil for the turbo potentially. You have the that goes into the comes out of the turbo and into the engine that needs cooling with an intercooler. The cooler for the intercooler, strangely a water-based one, and then you've got water and oil for all the hybrid systems. Now, all of the hybrid stuff and the water cooler for the charge air cooler for the intercooler tend to run at much lower temperatures, and they tend to bundle them all together in the center line of the car above the engine and gearbox, fed from the roll hoop. So this year we've gone to what everyone describes as a 50-50. Let's call it a 47-53 split between hybrid and combustion power. Means that the combustion engine now is putting a lot less heat out. So those side pods that hold the water and oil radiators are much smaller. The hybrid system's got, 3 times bigger than it was before, and therefore that's putting out more heat now. So the centerline cooling gets bigger. Now, some teams have probably rearranged where they've put all these coolers. It looks like the Red Bull teams have probably kept the side pods for the combustion engine cooling and everything else on the center line. So V-carb have got this massive inlet cooling all the hybrid and the turbo water coolers along the center line. Red Bull have gone almost, but not quite as far in terms of the size of their roll hoop inlet. But you look at it and you can see it is very big. And the side pods are tiny. And again, it's just the way that you choose to distribute the cooling and the shape of the body around the car. They must feel that they're getting more performance from small side pods than they are from having a big bulky engine cover ahead of the rear wing. So, again, it's just different people doing different things. But, Alpha Tauri, Carb, Racing Bulls, whatever they've been called over the past few years, have never really kind of level of potential that I think they have. And you look at their cars and you wonder why that isn't, because on paper there's so much good about all of their chassis over the years. So it's the year that they make good with their chassis. I wish I could predict this early, but again, it's an interesting car, and I think other teams can learn a few details from it to apply to theirs.
Let me ask you this, Scarbs. If Red Bull had said to Red Bull powertrains, if they have conversations, or told Red Bull powertrains and Ford very early on that we want to go for a small side pod car with large engine hoop, then Ford would have gone away and created that architecture, would they not? My point is, if Racing Bulls had then said, oh no, we want to go the other way, we want to have really big side pods and a tiny roll hoop, presumably Ford would have said, well, sorry, that's out of the question. You got to do what we want you to do. Is that how it would have worked, do you think?
The first half, definitely. Red Bull powertrains, Red Bull Racing, V-carb will all be speaking with Ford about what they want to do for the year. So there's lots of conversation. In fact, there's a point about the engine that I want to make as well. But The carb at some point during the development in the past year says actually want to go the other way. It's entirely possible you could still do that. You can rearrange radiators
Okay.
relatively, relatively easily. I mean, I'm not saying it's something you could kind of do in between races, but you could have a very different cooler distribution as we see, for example, with Haas and Ferrari. Slightly different story, perhaps, but yeah, it would be possible for them to be able to rearrange the radiators without major changes with the power unit. I think one thing that I'm interested to see when this Red Bull powertrain slash Ford engine comes out, how it mounts to the chassis, because the Red Bull has got very small side pods, which means that the radiators, the side pod bodywork, but also where all that hot air goes inside the side pod, has to go past the engine at some point. And as you probably remember looking at the Honda engine, there's this frame that mounts above the cylinder heads to kind of meet the mounting requirements. I think Red Bull have probably played about with something in that area, and it's driven by an AI image of an engine they had at their launch, but also about what they've been doing. The front of the engine would normally have 6 mounting points, big M12 bolts mounting the engine to the chassis. And for a number of years, both Red Bull and V-Carb, or the Faenza team, if you want to call them, actually mounted what the most outermost one of them on smaller and smaller little mounts on the chassis to get more airflow through. So I think now that they've got complete freedom with the power unit, I think that they're probably going to do something. And they've alluded to, really wanting to make the engine work with the aerodynamics. It's another way that they're playing with that, which you only get when you have complete control over a power unit program with your chassis.
Thanks, Scarbs, for that. Montreal 2001, good name, says, Hi, Peter, love the show. Question: the World Endurance Championship, WEC, had hybrid hypercars, but their sound, in my opinion, outclasses the modern Formula One cars. Do you think Formula One should try to match? What are the 26 engines actually sounding like, do you think?
Well, I mean, again, it's very difficult because what you hear at the track and what you hear on certain microphones is very different to what you hear on the TV. I think the new engines are sounding different. I think they're all sounding different from each other as well, which is quite interesting. Yes, the WEC hypercars, and even the LMP ones previously, there's a big difference in the engines that each manufacturer runs. So the Aston Martin Valkyrie hypercar is just a V12. sound Sounds loud and raucous. The Toyota V6 Turbo, which is probably the most analogous to a Formula One car, sounds different again. Yeah, again, I find it hard to comment because I'm never excited or unexcited by engine sounds at racetracks. But I think we will get a lot more noise from these cars, particularly on the overrun going into corners. Possibly, especially in qualifying, when the teams can afford to waste a bit more fuel to keep the turbo spinning. So yes, I mean, I think it's one of those things that we need to listen out for, and hopefully, the microphones in Formula One are picking up all of the real sounds that are there, because I think it's a lot more interesting in real life than sometimes it appears on the TV.
Last one for you, Scarbs, because you've been an absolute trooper, given all the dramas of today. But thank you so much. This one is Luke the Truth says, "What do you think? Are Ferrari getting superpower from steel cylinder heads? But is the compromise going to be aero because of a higher center of gravity?"
There's a rumor going around that Ferrari are running steel cylinder heads. Everyone I've spoken to kind of scratches their heads and goes, Why would you do that?" I don't know if it's true or not. So, for argument's sake, let's say that they are running steel cylinder heads, which would probably be for some kind of thermal advantage. Um, I can see it's not a super benefit. I don't think they're going to get massive amounts of power from doing that. So why else would they switch to steel cylinder heads? One of the reasons would be very similar to what I said with the Red Bull powertrain, the Ford Red Bull setup. It could be that with steel you don't have such big bulky shapes and structures because steel is stronger than aluminium. So maybe that works well for them. Maybe that's something they're trying to gain an advantage from. In terms of a weight and a center of gravity height problem, doesn't exist, doesn't matter, because Formula One, the little V6 engine, including the turbocharger, is 130 kilograms, which is, I don't, without the turbocharger, sorry, I stand corrected, which is a massive amount of weight for a tiny V6 engine. So there's more than enough spare weight in the regulations for you to have, you know, you could have a lead cylinder head if you wanted, I would imagine. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but the weight isn't a massive problem. Center of gravity height is specified within the regulations. So as long as you can meet what is actually a very high center of gravity height, we're unnecessarily high in my opinion, and don't even get me started on those other similar regulations for the engine. Yeah, I'm struggling to see where the advantage for Ferrari is, and I'm struggling to kind of pick up some of the rather bold claims some people have had about it in the media over the winter about the advantage of it. I think there's other factors that are much bigger in the performance of the power unit this year. Um, Bigger factors even in the performance of the cars overall. As I say, you've got tires, you've got energy management, aerodynamics, and engine power, engine torque, all that sort of stuff. It's a much bigger melting pot this year, and again, I think this is a story that kind of got a bit overblown in trying to match the compression ratio story that was also going around.
Yeah, good point.
At least part of it.
Good point. Scarbs, thanks so much for your time, buddy. Very, very kind of you to do that. And I think I speak on behalf of all the fans who've been watching and listening to the last half. Just brilliant insight as ever. We can do some more, right? As the cars become a little bit more visible in Bahrain, we'll love to do that. And particularly when the Aston hits the road as well. We'd love to talk to you on that and put some videos out.
It's going to be super interesting. Yes.
Great. Thanks, Scarbs. Have a great evening, buddy. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye. Bye. Right, Craig Scarborough, brilliant. What a guy. So I tell you what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to have a short break, and I'm going to put on a picture. A viewer said, Peter, when you're doing one of these breaks, make sure you got a picture of some popcorn there. So I'm going to do that, and I'll be back in a few minutes. Right, here we are back again. Thanks. Sorry about that. Before we go any further, I just wanted to record the passing of Hans Herrmann, one of just great racing driver. And I'm still in awe of the span of his career and the range of cars he raced and how proficient he was, I guess is the right word, super professional. Won countless world endurance races, Sebring, Daytona, Le Mans. Very, very good in sports cars and not bad at all in Formula One as well, in the one or two chances he had. So I thought I'd just, bearing in mind he's just passed away, age 97. I mean, what a guy. I thought I would just do show you a few pictures of what he was all about. He started in effectively 53 in this rather ropey car called a Veritas. There were a few of them around at the time. He was born in the Stuttgart area and started to show his pace in that, and very quickly impressed Huschke von Hanstein of Porsche and was given lots of opportunities. And because he went well there, by 54, he was racing a factory Mercedes in the German Grand Prix. He was named as a Mercedes driver as a result of that 54 couple of appearances for 55. And in 54, poor guy. I mean, everybody else was at the Nürburgring in the factory German Mercedes team in the normal W196 car. And he was in the Streamliner around the Nürburgring, a car that Fangio had said was almost impossible to drive around Silverstone. And there's Hans Herrmann, who drove that Streamliner in the 54 German Grand Prix, and he qualified fourth. Unbelievable. Right up there. Very, very good. Ahead of Hermann Lang, for example, in one of the open wheel W196s. And he didn't do much in the race, but on the back of that performance, you realized how quick Hans Herrmann was. And interestingly, 55, he had that factory drive for the year. But at the Monaco Grand Prix, in practice for the Monaco Grand Prix, he had a massive shunt at the top of the hill at Casino Square, going into Casino Square, pretty much as it is today, and went off on the outside, broke his pelvis and ribs and all sorts of things, and didn't race again that year. And here's the punchline. His place at Le Mans that year as a Mercedes factory driver was taken by Pierre Levesque, who was the driver who, well, Lance Macklin, Mike Hawthorne collided, and basically Levesque was a passenger in that and punted off on the left and somersaulted in his Mercedes into the crowd. And as we know, 55 or more, 85 people and Levesque were killed. Now, obviously, that may it may not have happened to Hans, but it was interesting. That was the car that Hans would have been racing had he not had that accident at Monaco. Anyway, fast forward to the 59 German Grand Prix. He's made a comeback and he's back to full health. But look at this. He's driving at Aarhus, which is where this 59 German Grand Prix was staged in Berlin. It was basically two parallel straights with corners at either end. And this one, you can see below the Martini sign, the track went right and then it went into a long left-hand loop. And anyway, he's in a BRP, British Racing Partnership, BRM, front engine BRM, and the brakes failed. And you can see he went through the straw bales there, and then somehow the thing got airborne. And that's him on the ground, crouching, watching that car destroy itself. Unbelievable photograph by Julius Wittmann, one of the great all-time Formula One photographers. You must look his work up. I think it's with Getty now. Pretty sure it's with Getty, one of the great photographers. And that picture is one of the classic all-time Grand Prix photographs, of course. So following year, he won the Targa Florio in this beautiful RS60 Porsche, which he shared with Joe Bonnier. And that was the beginning of Porsche's reign at the Targa and how well they did on that lovely circuit in Sicily over many years. And fast forward, he did a lot of winning in 68 in a Porsche 9. He drove a lot of great races for Porsche, 907s. In 68, he won 3 races, Daytona, Montlhéry and Sebring. And 69, he was in this beautiful 908 Longtail Coupe at Le Mans, and of course had that amazing battle with Jackie Ickx right to the last 100 meters of the 24-hour race, which Ickx won, having walked to his car at the Le Mans start in protest of how dangerous Le Mans starts were. Took his time with the seatbelts, etc. Anyway, Hans Herrmann, that car was slightly quicker in a straight line than Jackie's Golf GT40, and Hans passed Jackie on the Mulsanne straight on the last lap. They're having a big battle over the last hour, and Jackie knew that if he did that, he would just be able to dive down inside under braking, and the GT40 was better under braking, and take the lead into the Mulsanne right-hander, which he did and won the race. So Hans got a bit of flack for that, sharing the car with Gerard Larousse. Obviously, Gerard was not very happy, but made up for everything with victory at Le Mans in 1970 with Richard Atwood in that beautiful Porsche 917K in the colours of Porsche Austria, Salzburg. Hans-Dieter Deschamps, team manager. So he second in 69, won it in 70, and then he retired. He'd had enough, and good luck to him as well. But one of his last single-seater races actually was at the German Grand Prix in 69 in a Formula 2. We had this question in a live stream last week, actually. How did Formula 2 cars ever race in Formula 1? Well, there's a good example of Hans in a Lotus 59 Formula 2 car, Roy Winkelmann. The Formula 3 car was the 69, the F2 car was the 59. And there he is at the Nürburgring. He didn't actually race. He qualified, but he didn't race because his friend Gerhard Mitter was killed in practice that year, sadly, in a Formula 2 BMW, and along with Dieter Quester and another German driver, Hans decided not to race as a mark of respect for that and for Gerhard's loss. And so that was the end of his career, and he went on, as I say, to live to the ripe old age of 97. But can you believe it? Just look at these pictures again. I mean, it's hard to believe, isn't it, that there he is in the German Grand Prix 69 in a Lotus, a relatively modern-looking Lotus, I mean, by most standards, and probably even the same corner. There he is in a 54 Streamliner Merc at the Nürburgring. I mean, what a career. Amazing to have done that. And I was very privileged to, courtesy of Evie Gurney, Dan Gurney's wife, who were very close friends. The Gurneys were very close friends with Hans and his family, because basically Evie's from that part of Germany as well, and Dan obviously knew Stuttgart and Solitude very well. And through them, I did actually have a very brief conversation with Hans before he passed away, just at the end of last year. So thank you, Evie, for arranging that. And Hans, thank you for all your contribution to motorsport. One other thing, this is apropos nothing at all, but I rang Rob Wilson the other day just to say hi, as one does. And he was at Bedford doing a day with a driver, and it's always a bit embarrassing when I ring him and he's doing a day with the driver, because I never know if the driver can hear what I'm saying to Rob or whatever. And if he's on, Rob doesn't have a speakerphone, but he can for sure listen in on the mobile phone if they're in the car. And the first thing Rob said was, I'm coaching a very good driver right now. He's just set pole position. I said, what do you mean by pole? You mean the sort of Kimi Räikkönen pole, the only guy to go quicker than Rob Wilson over a coned lap? And he said, yeah, he's just beaten me by a tenth. I'm going to have to go out in a minute and sort it out. He said, no, but then he said, but this guy's really good. Incredible coordination, heel and towing, general feel for the car, just really, really good. I said, well, who's it? He said, oh, it's Chase Briscoe, the NASCAR driver. And in my ignorance, I said, no relation to Ryan Briscoe. No relation to Ryan Briscoe. He's really good. And he is I've been looking up his CV. He's very good. So I'm going to start watching NASCAR and start watching Chase this year. He's been in the Chase. He was right in end of last year. He was very, very good last year. So this guy, Rob Wilson, says Chase has got amazing hand-foot coordination and general feel for the car and the surface of the road. Really, really quick driver. So I thought I'd pass that on. Rob's usually not wrong about anything. And Chase Briscoe, there you go. Right. Let's get to some more questions and comments. If I can find the dreaded box. I suppose I can end the Zoom call now, can't I? I'm just going through all the different layers of stuff to get to what's happened to the chat box now? Doesn't seem to be going at all. Where is it? Where am I going? Live streaming. Okay, I've got to do the pop-out chat again. 1 second. It's already collapsed once, and I presume it's still going to do it again. I'm wondering whether this is the first time, as you probably know, viewers of this show, regular viewers will know, I've actually done a full-on Zoom live interview, and I'm just wondering whether it's overloaded everything. I hope not, because I've just spent a fortune on this computer. It's pretty high spec as well, he says with a smile. Let's see what's happening here. Stephen comes up with probably the most intelligent comment of the evening, saying, wouldn't it be funny if I'd said Nick Yellerly was in a yellow Porsche? Yeah. But speaking of yellow Porsches, I'm not sure I showed you that one, did I? If I got it? Maybe it's not there. But interestingly, Hans Herrmann raced a 9083 at the Nürburgring in 70, and it was yellow. I didn't know it was yellow till I did some research. It was the Porsche Austria car, but for that race, it was yellow. Really nice car. Yellow 9083. Beautiful. Tartusian says, great to hear Robin Frins mentioned. He truly should have gotten a go. Amazing in the original DTM too. Yeah. He was very quick driver. I was always impressed with Robin Frins. This has been delivered. Beautiful Colombian arepa. Can I eat it in front of you guys? Have the odd mouthful? I'm getting quite hungry. What time is it? 8:30 here in Spain. This is only, I think you only get these in Colombia, don't you? Arepas like this. Very good. Next one. Montreal 2001 says, apart from your great self, well, I'm not great, but anyway, thank you for mentioning who's worth listening to, the commentary and journalism. I have great respect for Martin Brundle, but a lot of others talk some serious nonsense. Well, I'm not going to comment on that, apart from saying, of course, Martin knows what he's talking about. He's good. So good. We've done that Toyota one. Return to the floor. David Brown says not allowing journalists and cameras to the Barcelona test is very bad public relations by F1. I think that's the case. I would agree with that. Luke the Truth, thank you, Peter and Scarbs. Well, thank you, Scarbs, is what I would say. Aldo Costa works for Delara. Yes, I thought he did. Right. Didn't answer this one. Scarbs didn't. Hi, Peter and Craig. We've seen quick times of Mercedes today. Unofficial looks like it's 1.52 seconds behind 2025 race record time. Do we expect this year's new regulation cars are faster than 25? I think they will be, won't they? With all that aero stuff and the top speed and the power and the push to pass. Well, they're 400 kilometers an hour. Certainly on fast circuits, they're going to be quicker. Around Monaco, maybe not. So, Box Fresh says, if 50 dogs barked at the same time, would it be louder than a Formula One car? Depends on the dogs, of course. Because Dexter, you probably only need 3 Dexters, I would think, to be louder than a Formula One car. Callie's amazing, says, excuse me, Tatusian. That would be amazing. Yeah, well, he is. He's mega. And I'm going to try and follow him throughout the year and what he's doing. I say follow him, just sort of keep everybody up to date, including myself, obviously, on what Callie's doing in Japan. And he will have got a bit of confidence, I think, from that wet drive in New Zealand. And quite a high standard of driving, too. So there you go. Jez James, hi Peter. Why do you think Lewis was a different or better driver prior to 21? Do you mean Lewis's natural talent of touch and feel was greatly affected because of the circumstances that led him down? Well, not because of the circumstances that led him down, but because of the car that led him down. He'd never driven a car with horrendous bouncing and flick oversteer and 0 front end. And of course, everything else would have gone through his mind when he was back at a hotel or wherever he was going to be when he wasn't in the race car. But when he was in the race car, he was suddenly in this monster of a car that was a shock to him, because who would ever have imagined Mercedes could have built such a bad car at the beginning of 2022? And I think that, because I say he'd never had to drive a car that bad, I don't think. I'm just trying to think, maybe his first season Euro F3 wasn't that quick. Maybe the car was difficult, but I don't think it was anything like as bad as the Mercedes F1 car in 2022. And I think, given the fact that by then he had won 7 world championships and he'd been racing in Formula One since 2007, that unlike a young guy who would, George Russell, who would adapt to some of a couple of the good things about the car and sort of be right on the edge on all the other stuff, I think Lewis, because he'd just done so much already, I think his approach was to, well, what's this all about? And he just tried to find a way of driving that gave him some sort of consistency and stopped him putting it in the wall every 5 minutes. And that way was to extend the brakes in a straight line, go in a little bit wider and be a little bit more circumspect about when he got the power on, and only get the power on when he could feel the car could take the load, and eliminate the possibility of, a mid-corner flick oversteer, or try to minimize bouncing as well, obviously, in terms of ride heights. And I think all of that added up to Lewis, changing his style. And I think he's found it quite difficult to get back to where he was in 21, when he was driving more or less as Max is driving right now. And Lewis was right there with Max. And he definitely was taking wider corner approaches throughout that period from 22 to 25, getting a little bit better last year. I say better, getting a little bit earlier into the corners, a little bit more confidence in the Ferrari, but still the Ferrari was not a great car. I still think that if magically this Ferrari is a quick car, by which I mean as quick as the 21 Merc was relative to the opposition, I think Lewis very quickly will get back to where he was. But if it's not, I don't see him getting back to that level if the car is a difficult car. And by that I mean flick oversteer, unpredictable rear, particularly medium high speed corners, and a front end that doesn't give him enough feel to be able to lean on it going in. And that's what Charles Leclerc obviously complains about most of the time as well. So there we go. I'm trying to limit to 2 questions per person as per the description of the video. I think that's only fair for everybody. And so I'm just going through now to try and get some new ones. Tatosian says, any thoughts on the new MotoGP regs? Absolutely none at all, I'm afraid. But I have got thoughts, not that it's relative to MotoGP, but I have got thoughts on the Monte Carlo Rally and my man, Ollie Solberg, who I started watching in 24 when he was in the Skoda Rally 2 and was just blown away by how good he was. And I remember back end of that year talking to some quite senior people at Hyundai saying, I can't believe you guys aren't rehiring Solberg. I mean, he looks unbelievably quick. He's like the quickest guy out there. He's unbelievable. And they said, oh, no, never. And his dad, Petter, was always in the way and telling everything was annoying with him. No way. I just thought, well, there's an opportunity gone. So I've remained obviously a Solberg fan throughout all of this. And last year, lo and behold, he easily blitzed the Rally 2 Championship, driving a Toyota Rally 2 GR Yaris, and got that one-off Rally 1 drive in Estonia. So I headed up to Estonia to watch him, and he duly won, as predicted. And now he's got his full-time Rally 1 drive with Toyota. And guess what happened in Monte Carlo? He absolutely destroyed everybody. And yes, the Hyundais were useless and were off the pace and never there. But for him to beat Ogier, Elfyn Evans in the way he did was just outstanding. And I'm just going to play a short video now, because you'll see quite early on in the video, you'll see Ollie runs wide at a hairpin, goes into a snow thing and stops almost and then continues. And he still won the stage, like 40 seconds. I mean, I don't know what the rest of them were doing. But I guess it's just how good Ollie Solberg is. He's just fabulous. Anyway, here's this Monte Carlo Rally video. It's very short, courtesy of Red Bull. Thanks to them. Enjoy.
The 2026 WRC season, underway in spectacular and dramatic fashion at the infamous Rally Monte Carlo. Full end proceedings for M Sport youngster Josh McAlean, caught out by the wintry conditions in the penultimate stage. Big impact, his Puma R1 badly damaged. Another moment for rally leader Oliver Solberg. 2 narrow escapes already this weekend. The young Swede caught out on the slush and snow, no harm done. Strong end to an otherwise frustrating rally for Hyundai. Frenchman Adrien Fourmeau blasting through the end of the rally power stage, but unable to repeat last year's podium finish. Welshman Elfyn Evans in second place, ready to take advantage of any mishaps, posting the quickest time in the power stage for maximum bonus points. Sebastian Ogier came here as the man to beat. Monte Carlo his favourite event. Not this year. The world champion finishing strongly on his way to another podium finish. A weekend to remember for Oliver Solberg, returning to the top flight of the sport in style. No mistakes in the final stages to become the youngest Monte Carlo winner of the WRC era. Extraordinary start to life back in the top flight. Oliver Solberg achieving what Dad, former world champion Petter, never managed, winning the most famous rally of them all. Solberg's winning margin an impressive 51.8 seconds, ahead of Elfyn Evans and Sebastian Ogier, completing a Toyota podium lockout ahead of Hyundai pair Adrien Fourmeau and Thierry Neuville.
Ollie Solberg, what a star. Of course, he's 69 now. And yeah, just a great guy as well. And his dad, Petter, who went to Rob Wilson a few times as well. And Elliot Edmondson, another star. I've got a short out with Elliot that I did in Estonia. Top man, lives at Silverstone, just a normal guy. Just can't believe, I guess, you know, he's just there right in the middle of the entire WRC world, isn't he? Have I got any other pictures here that I haven't... excuse me, haven't shown? I think we've gone through them all now. We've done all the rally stuff, so that's good. Right, on with more questions. Montreal again. Have to be the last question, Montreal. Got to be disciplined about this. Hi, Peter. Love the show. Thank you very much. Is there space for historic Formula One properly integrated into the Formula One calendar with X or B League drivers racing seriously? I don't think so. I don't. I mean, unlike other sports, I don't think sort of masters racing works in motorsport. That's just my opinion. It just isn't the same, really. And what do they drive? And it's difficult fitting into the cars and all that stuff. I think it's better to think of what you call B League there, which is what I always talk about. We need to have a second tier world championship for a lot of those guys that I mentioned in the Daytona 24-hour results. Guys like Robin Fritz, for example, very good example of a guy who never got an opportunity in Formula One, super quick. No doubt he would have been very, very good in Formula One. If we had a second tier Formula One now, and they were racing last year's cars or 2 years ago or 4 years ago, and they were cars that were built by the Formula One teams, and it was a championship with its own rights in every dimension, TV, commercial, still an FIA championship, but it was staged at circuits in countries where Formula One wanted maybe to progress in the future but needed to build up more interest around motorsport. That would be a great championship, and it would be a wonderful place for young Formula One drivers to show their talent. And obviously a few older ones would be there as well. But it doesn't, it doesn't happen. And so it's a shame. So Alpha 007 says, does Scarbs have S25? Because my S25 got an update today too. Good phone, average battery, price too much. Well, I can't imagine Scarbs would have bought it then if the price was too much. Probably got a reconditioned one. No, I'm probably doing him an injustice there, but those reconditioned ones are not bad, are they? Especially if you've got an Apple, because they are. I don't know about the Samsungs, but the Apples are. You get a service warranty with it. Sky F150 says, "Hi Peter, was this showing up? No, it's not. 1 second. Why isn't that showing up? Trying to get this one to work. Don't know why that's not happening. This thing's been giving me a lot of trouble. A lot of things have been giving me a lot of trouble today. One thing that could be going on is it's incredibly windy in Spain at the moment, and maybe there's some drama going on with the internet. Anyway, I have to read this one out. It says, hi Peter, if we were to compare tennis playing styles to racing driving styles, who would you say is the Pete Sampras of Formula One, and who would be the Max Verstappen of tennis? Pete Sampras. Yeah, he was great, wasn't he? So to me, he was a sort of Jackie Stewart. He was very polished and did everything in a fairly classic way. Had a few idiosyncrasies, but everything was very efficient, very polished, very good mental approach as well. So if taking an overall view, I would say Pete Sampras equals Jackie Stewart. The Max Verstappen of tennis would be Jimmy Connors, I would have thought. Showing my age with all those things. Let's find a current one. Would it be Alcaraz? I don't know. It's so difficult. Let me think. Complete natural talent. No, I would say it was. I would say it was more Djokovic, actually. Putting aside personalities, just in terms of style and how they play, and forging new ways of hitting the ball, I would say Djokovic is a sort of parallel to Max, just being perennially good. So yeah, that's a good question. Interesting question. Got to make you think, doesn't it? T.O. Rally. Hi, Peter and Scarbs. Greeting from Greece. Do you think Ferrari will bring a new aero package to the Bahrain test? I think based on what Scarbs has been saying, this is very annoying that I can't bring your questions up. So what I'm going to do is, yet again, reboot the browser thing in this thing here. Yeah, it's gone. Yeah, so here we go. Why does it keep disappearing, that thing? It's so odd. It's kind of cool how we can do it mid-show, though, isn't it? Reboot it, as it were. You guys probably don't think it's cool. You're thinking, what is going on here? What a waste of time. It's interesting. The code there for it, the last 3 letters are DFV. Maybe the next question will be about Cosworth. How about that for a browser now? Where are we? I just got to get. Anyway, so I was just looking at a super chat then. I don't know anything about this, what this is all about, but anyway, putting it up from Mac 790. Hi, Peter. Hope the rumors regarding Schumacher are true. I know you're one of the few journalists that never vilified the man. He's greatly missed. Well, you're saying you hope it's true, which suggests that maybe there's some relatively good news about Michael. Have I missed that? Let me just Google that one. Okay, it says he's no longer bedridden after skiing accident. So anyway, Michael Schumacher is reportedly no longer bedridden nearly 13 years after his skiing accident and can now sit in a wheelchair, making significant milestone in his recovery. Doctors say such progress reflects the slow, long-term nature of traumatic brain injury rehabilitation, where improvements can continue for years through neuroplasticity, even without full independence or communication. Oh, that's great news. And I hope it is true, you know? I think we all do. I mean, I don't think a day has gone by since the accident when I haven't thought about Michael and how, A, we should never forget him, and B, wondering about how he is and if he can make any recovery. And I was only thinking about Mick today and how poor Mick's career's kind of faded away. But yeah, I just hope that's true. That's wonderful news if it is. Wonderful news, Michael. Yeah, I mean, it was impossible for me. I mean, I don't know what other journalists or people thought. It was impossible not to respect and like the guy, and I just wanted to know as much about Michael as I could. You know, I didn't get to know him very well at all, but I just was in awe of everything he did. So let's have a look at some others. Not too much longer to go. Luke the Truth. Yeah, Luke the Truth. Too many questions, Luke. It's getting, you know, it's difficult for me because I know how much everybody wants to ask questions, and I really appreciate it. I just don't want people to, you know, to get a bit too edgy because they're not getting their questions heard. Let's have a look. So, somebody said to me, I can't remember who it was now, I couldn't find it. This was the, this is a really important question. This was the popcorn I put up during the break. And he says, dancing hamburgers and hot dogs next. Let's all go to the lobby. Well, yeah, absolutely. There you go. Yeah, I'm talking about Hans Herrmann. There you go. It wasn't even the one with the brake failure at Avos. There he was indeed. There you got that picture. Julian Weissman's picture. Great Mercedes team of the 50s he was. John Fitch too. Yeah, John Fitch won the TT, didn't he, I think, in Ireland? Yeah, I spoke to John Fitch too. Got to meet him at Lime Rock. I was there with Sam Posey one day. Sam was thrashing around in an M5, and there was John Fitch. Couldn't believe it. Shook his hand, said hi. Great bloke, very intelligent, much more intelligent than me. I didn't know what to say to him really. Jackson Rodriguez. Hi, Peter. Do you think if asked, Max will be able to explain how he takes different corners and drives so fast? Or is it just his instincts that he cannot put into words? The latter. I don't think Max really thinks. I don't think any great driver does that they actually drive very differently from anybody else. They just think they're quicker and they do it better. But they don't actually, I mean, why would Max spend a lot of time working out how Yuki Tsunoda actually drives, or Liam Lawson drives, or indeed Isaac Hadjar drives? He's focused 100% on what he does. And I mean, and Jim Clark said he used to notice that he got into the corners a bit earlier than the other drivers usually. That was about as far as it went, but he didn't really analyze what they were doing. He just got on with his own thing. So I don't think he really is aware of it. I think he just thinks, what are they all doing? uh, right, where are we going? It's going to have to. I'm just coming through a few questions here of people I'm going to have to block because they're saying very rude things or swearing, one of the two, and neither of which, all of which you can do in some other place, but not on my channel. Thank you very much. So there's another one I'm going to block. Good. Where are we? Okay, our reptiles are in all Latin America. Okay, well, my wife needs to take some sort of punishment for that then, because she said, no, but I'm not sure they're like this. So this is the Colombian style, okay? That's the difference. That's what my wife tells me. And I'm happy to believe her because it's delicious. Very good. This next one's a good question. Zavage Dugal, we had you before, but I'm going to ask you because this is a good question. Hi, Peter. It took Red Bull 3 years to be a championship contending team with Adrian. Why do you think Aston can do it in 1 year? Well, because it's not 1 year. He's had 1 year to do the car, don't forget. And in the case of Adrian going to Red Bull, it was he went to Red Bull and then they basically ran the other car for a year. And at that point, Adrian was then getting good people around him, the Rob Marshalls of this world, the Pete Prods, and he was putting together his team. And Red Bull itself wasn't as good a team as it would become, partly because of Adrian, partly because of the way Christian put into action a lot of what Adrian wanted to do. And Christian had his own ideas as well, which were not bad. With Aston Martin, it's very different. The team is a very good team. We know that. It's a very good team. There's nothing wrong with that team. Very good driver as well. And you could argue maybe right back in the early first year at Red Bull, Adrian, it wasn't quite the sort of Max Verstappen lineup, was it? No offense there to DC, but he's not Max. And anyway, moving on to Aston Martin, I do think that he's with a year and it's new regulations, so it's sort of clean sheet of paper. He's got the same build up to this car time frame as everybody else. So I don't see why he wouldn't. If he will build the car that he wants to build, and I don't think it'll be any sort of compromise because it's only his second year at Aston Martin. I think it'll be as good a car as Adrian can do. That's why I think it'll be a very good car, and I don't think there's any parallel with when he first went to Red Bull or Jaguar as it was. Well, Red Bull as it became. So there we go. What else have we got here? Damien Schutten says, you often say the strength of a Charles Max is to take rear wing out of the car and deal with it in the corners. Is this strength nullified by the active aero since you can switch mid-race now? I haven't said that's what they do. What I've said is that all they need in order to do what they do is a proper front end. And more than most drivers, when they've got a front end, they can pretty much make the car work. Obviously, they would love to have a great back end as well. But if they've got to live with flick oversteer or poor traction as a result of having a great front end, they can do it and they can put the lap together. That's the difference. It's not just, they want to run as little rear wing as possible. And you make a good point, and I've thought about this a lot already. If they're taking a lot of wing out of the car now for everybody, is that going to give them more advantage or less? I think actually it's probably going to give them more advantage because they're going to be able to deal. There are going to be moments when, if you can hold the DRS open a little bit longer or get it flat a little bit sooner, you're going to get a big advantage. The guys that are going to be able to do that well are going to be Max and Charles and possibly Hajar and possibly George and maybe Oscar. I'm not sure Lando, but I think Oscar. I think on balance, I think the new regs probably will work for Max and Charles and those guys. So Luke says, Luke the truth, no secret Mercedes is hunting Max. Yeah, well, so Ferrari and so McLaren. But anyway, there you go. But if Red Bull is like 3/10 slower than Mercedes, I think Red Bull can play this game of next year we have a supercar to keep Max, to keep hold of Max. You know where Red Bull is aiming. Well, I don't think they'll ever deliberately not have the best car they can possibly have. And it could well be that the Mercedes is the better car. But for Max to leave Red Bull to go to Mercedes, the Red Bull's got to be pretty bad, I think. And because what's he want to, does he want to go to a Mercedes with George Russell in the other car, having presumably, if it's that good, he's just won the world championship? Does Max want to do that? I'm not sure he does. And anyway, as I say, I think you'll find Ferrari will be on the phone to him on a daily basis. I'm exaggerating slightly. I think McLaren will be, any self-respecting team will be constantly talking to Max Verstappen. Why wouldn't you? You wouldn't be doing your job if you weren't. I mean, when Nigel was going well, Arrows, everybody would ring him all the time, trying to get him in the car. I would imagine Jonathan Wheatley's on the phone to him every day, trying to get him an Audi. Why wouldn't they be? So where are we going now? So Antoine says, I did actually answer this one. Yeah, I think it'll be good. I think it'll be good for drivers like Max and Charles in general. I do. I think there'll be a couple of guys who are pretty good at racecraft and all, using everything at the right time and the push to pass and the boost and all that stuff. And I don't know who those will be. It's probably guys that do a massive amount of gaming. Well, not gaming, sims. Guys like Lawson and that probably quite good, I would think. So there you go. So I don't know. We've got a few more questions. Tom K 7616. Hi Peter, I haven't heard the name Felipe Massa in a while. Do you believe he declined after his accident with the debris hitting his helmet? Just how fast was he before that? Well, gotta say, on his day he was as quick as Michael, and he beat Michael a few times, notably Turkey. I mean, he was always unbelievably quick in Turkey, wasn't he? But he was good everywhere for a while. I mean, 08 he was really good. So no, I don't think, I mean, the accident, what was 09, wasn't it? And I think the problem then was Alonso. He never really got on with Alonso at Ferrari. I think he felt that he had this great setup at Ferrari, and it was all destroyed. I think from his perspective, it was all destroyed by Fernando. We wanted everything around his side of the garage, and he was the star driver. Whereas Michael never made Felipe feel that way, and they worked pretty much in harmony. And I think Felipe lost a lot of feel for the racing life as a result of that, actually, to be honest. But I think he was quick. And I think he was Carlos Sainz quick. And I think he drove quite like Carlos Sainz as well. Rotten Steam says, make this the last question, I think. Why was Nigel so much faster than Patrese in the 14B? As you're an insider, what did the data say? Well, he was just, he just was unafraid. That's the wrong word. He had enough feel for the car, for what it was going to do if he went over this bump with his foot flat on the throttle, through his conversation with Patrick and general feel for the car anyway. He just knew that he would have even more downforce probably, whereas Ricciardo would just give it the slight lift. Being a sort of classic racing driver, quite wide, late turn in, and just a classic racing driver really, Carlos Sainz. And whereas Nigel was short corners, very, very supple, incredible feel for the car. I mean, basically a faster racing driver than Riccardo Patrese in every dimension. And there were a couple of moments in 91 where Ricciardo looked very good, but they were usually when Nigel had a lot of problems with the electronics, didn't get many laps in, wasn't happy with this, happy with that. But when the car was running, there was no comparison really. And he was a perfect teammate for Nigel in that. He would have been, Riccardo Patrese at his peak would have been a perfect teammate to Max Verstappen, for example. And probably better than Sergio Perez, I think. Certainly better with the front end than Sergio Perez. Maybe not quite as good as on the rear. But yeah, very good. But there was no comparison between the two when they were in good cars. When both cars were running, Nigel was the guy. He was super quick. So, and Jay said, hi Peter, I've sent you my model for comparing all 76 seasons. Hope you've received it well. I haven't received it yet, but I haven't gone through the email that is in the description recently. I must do that. Sorry, I've been absolutely flat out this week preparing for this Scarbs live stream, which was going to be absolutely perfect with no issues at all. Hope you've received it well. Which season was better in your eyes? Amon 72 or Verstappen 25? Which season was better in your eyes? Amon 72 when he was, what was Amon in the Matra? Okay, and leading, should have won the French Grand Prix in the MS 120C Matra, or Max in 25. Well, I think the Matra was a better car in 72 than the Red Bull generally was over a year in 25. But having said that, Chris was, you never really knew, because it was the only car. It was a one-car entry, and so you never really had a feel for how good or bad the Matra was. Chris was always quick, and he was, I mean, that French Grand Prix at Clermont, I was lucky to be there. It was one of the fastest, most impressive things I've ever seen. It was standing on one of the banks on the fast corners after the start, watching Chris Amon in the Matra V12. And I've got to say, probably the best sound I've ever heard in Formula One as well. Just unbelievable revs, and Chris's gear changing and his positive throttle application, just awe-inspiring. Unbelievable. So, yeah, Amon 72. Thanks for mentioning that. You know, I've got great memories of that. Anyway, thank you, everybody, and particularly Rottenstam who's put that up. But thank you very much, Rottensteam, sorry, for taking part today. And I know Scarb's already sent a message saying, I'm really sorry about the phone. Don't worry, we all live and learn. I didn't even know he was on a phone. I assumed he was on a laptop, plugged in. But, you know, it was pretty good image, actually, bearing in mind he was on a phone, wasn't it? Amazing, really, if you think about it. So, yeah, we'll do more with Scarbs, and we're going to have lots of other live guests as well. There is one actually coming up very soon. We haven't actually got the date sorted, but it's a company that has done quite a lot of work with the teams on battery design and development. And they've agreed to come on the show and talk about that and where we're going with batteries in general, solid state or otherwise. So that'll be good. Look forward to that. And of course, we'll be doing live streams with Mark Slade and some other yet to be mentioned special guests that we're going to have along as well. So thanks for watching. Have a very good Wednesday night or day, whatever part of the world you're in, rest of the week, weekend. See you again soon. I'll be doing some videos, of course, in the normal way. Till then, take care.